Tanya Plibersek, the Shadow Minister for Women and Education too. Tanya, good morning to you. Thanks for your time as always. So this would be a reversal of Labor's laws. So should foreign criminals be charged for their own detention?
Look, we're happy to look at any sensible proposal, but isn't it interesting that the government's been there for almost a decade? This guy's been Prime Minister for 3 years. Before that, he was the Immigration Minister, or, before being Treasurer, he was the Immigration Minister. He could have done it at any time, and he's picking a week out from an election to do this. I just think it's really interesting timing. Of course, we'll look at sensible proposals.
OK, so that would mean overturning your own law. You think that would be OK?
Well, we've only seen some details of this proposal. We're going to take a little bit of time, look at it properly. If there's anything sensible in there, you see what we've been doing, right through the pandemic. We have sought to work with the government in the national interest. Whenever there's been something sensible that they've proposed, we've been happy to support it. But we're not going to just take on face value what Scott Morrison's saying. And it is worth remembering, he was the Immigration Minister. He could have done it when he was the Immigration Minister. He's been the Prime Minister for 3 years. This government's been in power for almost a decade. And we're saying now, a week out from an election, he's come up with this brilliant new idea and everybody has to fall in line immediately. I mean, I think it looks a bit like policy that's been dreamt up for a political campaign, doesn't it?
OK, so what questions would you have about foreign criminals who are here having to pay for their own detention?
Well, I'm not going to just respond without having any time to consider the proposal that's been put before us. We're going to look at it. We'll consider it sensibly. You see our record. We've been very prepared to work with the government on sensible proposals from the government. We've been prepared to back them on a range of things, especially during the pandemic. If it's in the national interest, Labor is up for it. What we're not going to do is take Scott Morrison at face value a week out from an election. We'll consider the proposals thoroughly and thoughtfully, and if there are elements that we can support because they're in the national interest, we'll do that. OK.
Intelligence warnings suggest a heightened risk for people smugglers who may look to test a new government. Are you planning or preparing for this if you do in fact win?
Well, our policy is the same as the government's policy. There will be boat turnbacks, there'll be offshore processing and regional resettlement. So if the people smugglers do test us, that's the response they'll get. We know that people smugglers take advantage of people at their most vulnerable time. People smugglers aren't humanitarian heroes. They are people taking advantage of vulnerable people fleeing conflict situations, sticking them on leaky boats. They don't care if they make it to Australia or drown on the way. We're not going to have any tolerance for people smugglers starting up their trade in human misery.
But no temporary protection visas?
Well, temporary protection visas are a very different matter. When people are found to be genuine refugees, they've been here for years, they've formed families, relationships, set up businesses, they're supporting themselves. Why would you keep those people in limbo for the rest of their lives? And why would you keep reprocessing those people? We know that the Department of Immigration has massive delays in things like, fiancé visas or people who are coming to visit family members. They've got massive delays. And instead of having them reprocess the same people again and again who are settled here and making a contribution to our community, perhaps we could have them focusing on family reunion and some of the visa categories that have blown out to months-long or even years-long waiting times.
But back to those intelligence warnings, though. I mean, the intelligence suggests that there is a heightened risk that they would be looking to test you if you win. So you would be expecting them to test you?
Well, the government says the intelligence warnings are saying this.
Okay. So you doubt that's the case?
I haven't had any personal advice that that's the... Well, I don't know. I haven't had any personal advice that that's the case. What I am saying to you is Labor is absolutely determined not to let people smugglers start up their trade again, because we know that the cost of that is human life. People drown on the way. And we don't believe that organised criminal syndicates should be profiting from human misery in this way. We do think that Australia can have a more compassionate approach to people who are struggling in our region. As you know, Labor has a plan to lift the humanitarian intake. We should also be doing more in our region to help in countries where people are desperate for assistance. We know that people prefer to stay in their home country if they possibly can, and by assisting to people to stay more safely in their home country, we're also taking the pressure off the millions of displaced people that are in the world today. So it is about having a strong response to people smugglers, making sure that they know that they won't be successful in plying their illegal trade, but also the ability to be more compassionate and to help countries, particularly in our region, build a stronger and more secure region so that people aren't forced to flee.
Okay, the Greens yesterday released its immigration policy, Tanya. They want to abolish the Australian Border Force, end offshore detention. They want to scrap boat turnbacks. If you happen to lead a hung parliament and need the Greens' support, would your position on borders soften?
No, absolutely not. No.
Scrapping Border Force, that's a pretty wild policy, isn't it?
Well, it's the Greens, right? I mean, I can't answer for them. That they've got all sorts of policies that I don't agree with. This is just one of them.
So what if you need their support and that's part of their conditions? What do you do then?
Well, it'll be up to the Greens, won't it? If they want to back Scott Morrison in a hung parliament, that's a matter for them. We're not making any deals. The leader's been very clear about that. We are not making deals. Okay,
well, you've got the Greens that announced its border policy yesterday. The government is announcing its today. Will you be releasing one too?
Well, everybody knows our policy. Our policy is turnbacks where it's safe to do so, offshore processing and regional resettlement.
Just a final one here before we go, just on the wages. Anthony Albanese, did he shoot from the hip when he said that the minimum wage should rise by 5.1% this week?
He said what every Australian knows, which is the poorest workers in our country shouldn't be expected to take a pay cut. So we're talking about people earning $20.33 an hour, asking for an extra $1 an hour. And Scott Morrison says we can't afford that. It is just incredible to have a Prime Minister who says he wants people on $23.33 an hour to go backwards. A few years ago, we had a Liberal minister who said low wages are a deliberate design feature of our economic architecture. And since then, Scott Morrison's been pretending that that's not true. Well, you've seen the proof of it. We actually have a Prime Minister who, when asked, should Australians be paid at least the minimum wage, says it depends. So he doesn't think they should get at least the minimum wage. For those people who are on the minimum wage, he doesn't think they deserve a pay rise. Now remember, those people on the minimum wage, they're not just employees in a business, they're also customers. We know that people on $20.33 an hour aren't going to stop and buy a cup of coffee on the way to work. They're not going to take the kids out for pizza on a Friday night. They cannot afford to. When people on low wages get a little bit of extra disposable income, guess what? They spend it creating jobs for other Australians. They spend every dollar of it creating jobs for other Australians. We've got government ministers on $400 grand a year saying they need a pay rise. We've got a Deputy Prime Minister who, when his pay got cut to a backbench salary of $211,000 a year, said, I'm struggling to make ends meet. These same people are saying someone earning $20.33 an hour should go backwards in their purchasing power. I just cannot believe that these people think this is somehow fair.
All right, I'm getting a wrap now. Tanya Plibersek, good to have you with us. Thanks for your time as always. Appreciate it.